My guest today is Steven Skeels. He's been in the entertainment business for 45 years. He had no training, and yet he rose to the top, and he's been in all sorts of things. His background is that his father died when he was 9, and his mother raised 9 kids in absolute poverty. So he didn't have all of the training that a lot of people do, and yet he made it. He's had a lot of adversity in his life. And I think the thing that I noticed most in talking to him and listening to his story was how many times he said how terrified or scared he was of doing something. And yet he pushed through and he succeeded. It's a great episode. I hope you enjoy it. And as always, if you haven't done it, hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, and leave a comment. You know I love all that stuff. Good morning. This morning I'm with Steven Skeels. He's been in various business, entertainment things, creative things for 45 years?
45 years, yes.
So he's a singer, a songwriter, a composer and lyricist, a producer, an actor, a performer, and he's producing a documentary. What'd I miss?
I think that just about covers it.
Well, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Why are you such a slacker? Say hello to all my peeps.
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here.
And I think we're going to probably have 2 episodes with Steven because there's way too much material to cover in one. So we're going to kind of hit some of the professional, but some mostly personal stuff today.
Great.
So let's hear about you. Tell me, where'd you grow up? Yeah, I know you had a huge family.
Yeah, I grew up in Evansville, Indiana, which is right on the border of Kentucky, very southern Indiana. I'm the youngest of 10 children. My siblings were Elaine, Linda, Ricky, Alan, Debbie, Randy, Ronnie, Diana, Gary, and Stephen. And we were actually very, very poor, very severe poverty. My father passed away at 9 years old. By the time they had me, my father was already in and out of mental institutions. He suffered from paranoid schizophrenia.
Wow.
So it was very traumatic and dramatic household growing up, which I think lends itself a lot of good stuff for being an actor and a performer. But actually living life, it was quite a scary journey, especially in my childhood, for sure.
Now I was looking at like your preview for your documentary, and your siblings flashed on there. It looked like there was 9 of them. Is that right?
Yes, one passed. My brother Ronnie actually passed before I was born. He died at 9 months old. He had pneumonia.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a twin. Ronnie and Randy were twins. And my brother Randy was not feeling well at all, so my mom took him to the doctor. But Ronnie seemed to be fine. And ended up being that Ronnie had actually had pneumonia and kind of like a crib death. He passed away in his sleep.
Wow.
Which is very traumatic for my mother,
Yeah,
of course.
Hard on her, right?
Yes.
I had a sister that died 3 years before me at birth. Same thing. So
It's hard, yeah.
Okay. So you're very poor.
Very poor.
Are you the only gay guy in your
Well,
gay
I
person?
have a brother who I think would, I don't know if he would verbalize that he's bisexual, but I kind of have known that he's bisexual for quite some time. But he's very different from me. I'm an artist. It took me a long time to deal with my sexuality as well. I dated a woman for 4 years, thought I was going down that path. And then I finally just realized I couldn't live that lifestyle. I started performing professionally at 15, and I was already going out of town and starting to, look at boys and that sort of thing. And then I started to act upon that a little bit later, 17, 18.
How old were you when you said, I'm different? You probably didn't have the word gay at that point, right?
I was always a different sort of child. My siblings would say, I pretty much popped out of the womb like being a performer. And when I was 4 or 5, I would just used to get up and entertain my siblings. And they would take it for so long. They were like, Mom, please make him stop. And throw pillows at me, try to do anything they could to get me to stop, which only, made me want to do it even more.
So what you're saying is when you were born, the doctor spanked you, and instead of yelling, you sang.
I sang. He went, yeah. No. And so I knew that I always marched to my own drum. That's what my mom said from the time I was a very, very little boy. And I think everything really shifted and changed when I was 7 years old. My mom, somehow, she was able to get a little bit of money, and she took me and my sister, Diana, they were having like a cheap night at the movies to see the movie called Funny Girl with Barbra Streisand.
Oh, yeah.
And I was so little, I couldn't see. I had to sit on the back of my knees and set up because I was too little. I was also very small for my age until I was 15, 16.
Okay.
I grew another foot. I mean, they didn't know if I was ever going to grow. I was very, very short, 4'8". And then in a year, I grew an entire foot. And so as a little boy, I was very, very little. And she came on and said, "Hello, gorgeous." And I was just literally mesmerized. By the time she got to the song People, I had goosebumps the entire movie.
Wow.
I came home.
You were 7?
7.
Wow.
And I could remember a lot of it. I came home and I stood in the living room with this sheer curtain. It was basically a rag. And I just said, "People, people who need people." And I had a tear come down my eyes. I was able to do the drama.
No
and
way.
Yeah, I really did. I really could. And I told my mom when we left, I said, "That's what I'm going to do the rest of my life. Whatever that is up there on that screen, that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I'm going to be."
Wow.
And I knew at that young age. And then about 3 or 4 months after that, we were watching TV and there was a movie that came on with New York City. And I said, "That's my home. That's where I'm supposed to be."
Wow.
"I'm not supposed to be here." And my mom was like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'm just supposed to be there." And so that's where eventually.
And you were how old?
Took me a while.
Still
7. 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
But
she said even as a baby.
Wow.
She said as a baby, even at 6 or 7 months, she said, "I used to hum all the time. I would hum or if music would be on the radio or something." She said that there was something in my face that she would just look at me and I would just be in my own little world. And I would just start humming. And by the time I was 5 and 6, I was already harmonizing, making up harmonies with the radio. And I don't know where I got it. Well, my grandfather, her father, was an Irish tenor, and he always dreamed of being a professional singer. But he got my grandmother pregnant, back in the day when he was able to fulfill his dream. And then my mother's dream was always to be an actress and a writer. I became sort of an actress, writer, and a singer, all 3 of them combined in my lifestyle. So I guess those genetics were strong, but no one had ever done anything professionally until me. Now I have a nephew who's a filmmaker, professional filmmaker, actor, and a director. And I had a niece who was an opera singer. What's that?
Is he straight?
He is straight, yeah.
Wow.
Has a wife and 3 kids.
Cool.
He is straight. He's actually editing my documentary. We're working on that together. Yeah.
Dang, finding a good editor. That's a great deal.
And he's had a lot of background in doing that. So, and it's kind of beautiful to work with my nephew. And he actually, I saw him on stage when he was very young, 17 or 18. We're very, very similar types. We look a lot alike. He had a lot of my mannerisms. So it was kind of strange to look at someone and go, I kind of see myself up there. But so at 7, I knew. And then in my grade school, I remember the day that the Vietnam War ended. I think I was 9. I got a call from the principal to come down to the principal's office. And I sang the song, "Let There Be Peace on Earth," over the entire sound system.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you'd been singing in school, though? They knew
I've been singing in the choir. The
Right.
choir teacher knew. She had told the principal that I was somebody special. She thought I had something really special. And then so all through, and unfortunately for me, because we were so poor and going to a public school, my grade school, the music teacher had a beautiful music program. And then my high school that I went to, North High School in Evansville, was probably rated one of the top music schools for public schools in Indiana.
Wow.
Because my teacher, my professor of music in high school, was best friends with the guy who ran the IU music program, Indiana University, which is one of the top music programs in the country. And so he would get all the arrangements and we would do them. We wore tuxes and tails, like 15, 16 years old. Yeah, it was amazing. And so I learned so much. And he also took me aside very early and said, "You have something very special." And everyone knew that I wanted to do this professionally. He said, "You can do it. I believe you can actually do this."
Wow.
And being poor, and my mom didn't know, how we were going to make this happen, but I was doing a concert, had a solo in the choir in high school, and there just happened to be a producer in the audience of theme parks in upstate Indiana, Santa Claus Land, Indiana. It was a place called Santa Claus Land. There is a Santa Claus, Indiana, believe it or not. And he hired me on the spot backstage. He said, "I want you to work at this theme park." And I learned, you're doing 5 shows a day. He learned all this material, and he was giving me all these principal roles. Even in the actual theme park, I was getting a lot of features more than a lot of people. He just saw my love and my passion for it. And I started in high school. I started dancing with a friend. We'd do competitions. I would win money doing dance competitions. So I'd go out to little clubs at night. They had underage clubs for kids to go.
Oh, really?
And we would do disco. Yeah, I won several disco competitions. I won in Louisville, Kentucky. I won $300 when I was 16 years old. And so I just started, everything was always about performing. Even when I was a child, and my one teacher in 4th grade, Mrs. Reynolds, that's what her name. She said, "Stephen, stop daydreaming. Not everything is about show business." I said, "Well, for me it is." And it always has been. Right. Not everything, but I love show business. I love what I do.
Did you go from Indiana to New York?
No, that was a long journey to get to New York. I did the theme park, our high school, 16, 17, those 2 summers. Right after I finished high school, I went to Indiana State University of Evansville for a year. But out of that year, I probably was there about 2 months because I started getting professional jobs. So I was traveling. So I probably would have flunked out had I been there, but I was able to charm the teachers and they knew that I was, doing professional work, and I had that way of just like, letting them know how much I love it and the passion, whatever. And they kind of gave me grades I didn't really deserve, if I have to be honest.
Really?
Because I never studied.
You should have gone into sales.
I don't think I've been good at sales.
No.
But no, so I started doing that. And then that summer, I started working at Kings Island, which is another amusement park, but really, really professional shows. A lot of my friends I work with now have been on Broadway, been in film, TV. So it was also, fortunately, I think the angels literally were smiling down on me, and they just knew with my poverty and not a background. And I never studied singing, dancing, or acting, but I would watch. My way of studying was I would watch TV, I would listen to the radio,
right.
I would see ballets on TV, and I would try to imitate what they were doing. I was very limber. I could kick behind my head and do splits and all that stuff, and I had natural rhythm. Yeah, and then the singing, I studied Barbra Streisand, at Nat King Cole. As I got a little older, Diana Ross. These were all the people, Luther Vandross. So my learning was their style because they all had the greats. Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan. The greats always had something that made them unique. And Barbara was the biggest influence for me, though. But her straight tone, the way she could just take a phrase and do a straight tone, and using lots of dynamics, going from very soft to very loud. Yeah. But storytelling was always about the storytelling. And then I just started doing a little bit of acting, which also came in. And it's all storytelling, singing, dancing, acting. It's all storytelling. And my composing the same way. It's a way for me to express myself and get all these things that are in my head out and into the world. But naturally, I haven't had any training in any of the above, but have been lucky and had a very fortunate career.
That's amazing. So how old were you when you finally arrived in New York?
I arrived in New York I was living in Los Angeles. I moved out to LA.
Oh, you were in LA then? Okay.
Yeah, to back up a little bit, I was working at Kings Island, and one of the guys in the show, he was a bass player and he also was a songwriter, and he loved my voice. And so he took me in the recording studio and we recorded like 5 or 6 songs, original songs. So I thought, now I have my demo, I can go to LA. So the job ended. I went to LA. I thought, I'm going to make it. Here's my big break. They're going to be waiting for me, screaming for me. Of course, it doesn't work that way. And so
there are other people there, guys that want to do it too?
I didn't think there were. I guess I was, So anyway, while I was there, I just started doing some theater work in LA. And I had an audition for a callback for a show called Les Miserables that was a huge hit in New York City. And I was up for a role called Marius, which is one of the principal characters. It was like my 3rd callback. And the audition was at this place called the Debbie Reynolds Studio. Everybody remembers Debbie Reynolds. And so it was in North Hollywood. And so I'm kind of a type A. I'm always early. I'm always prepared and that type of thing. And so I got there about a half an hour early. And then I noticed across the room, they were setting up for a different kind of audition. And the monitor, there's an equity monitor usually, which is someone that will come out and take your picture and your resume and make sure that you're showing up on time. And she came up and she said, "Oh, are you here for our show?" And I said, "No, what's your show?" She said, "Starlight Express," which is a roller skating spectacular that Andrew Lloyd Webber had done first in London, then it moved to New York, which I'd seen it in New York before I moved to LA. And I went, "Oh, Lord, no, that show is not for me."
Could you skate?
No, I wasn't a skater. I wasn't anything.
Really?
And so she said, "Oh, okay." And so I went and sat back down. And for some reason, then the people, the creative team, they came in. For some reason, I guess the director or when the casting director saw my look and told her to come back out and ask if I would audition. So she came back a second time. I said, "Oh, no, I'm here for my Les Mis audition. I'm preparing for that." And she said, "Okay." She came back a third time. They said, "They just want you to come in and say hi. You're early. You said you got here a half an hour early. There's still 15 minutes before your audition." So I went and I said hi.
All this had happened in 15 minutes.
All this happened.
Boom, boom, boom.
It was that fast.
Yeah.
And so I just went in, and the guy sitting behind the table was a guy named Paul Bogave, which I later realized was one of the top casting people in New York City.
Oh.
Yeah. Very, very influential musician and musical director. And so I was just being silly because I wasn't afraid or nervous. I was more concerned about my Les Mis audition. So I think I was just very free and very open. Right. And so he said, "Okay, just do me a favor." He said, "I know you're not auditioning for this show. I know you don't skate. I know that you don't think this show is right for you. Would you what do you have? What are you singing for your Les Mis callback?" I said, "Well, I'm actually singing Empty Chairs and Empty Tables from the show." He said, "Would you have something else?" I said, "Well, I have a song called The Day He Wore My Crown," which is a Sandy Patty, a gospel singer. I was a huge fan of hers as well. Right. But it's like a 5-minute piece. And I hadn't cut it. It was just in the back of my book, my audition book. And so I gave it to the piano player and I started singing and I did the entire song 5.5 minutes.
Wow.
And I was done and he sat there quietly and then he's like, "Wow, could you sing something else?" So I said, well, I have a song from Dreamgirls called When I First Saw You. I thought he would cut me off. I sang that entire song, which is like a 3.5-minute song.
Wow.
And then after that, he said, okay, he said, I'm going to give this music and I want you to come back tomorrow at 9:00. I said, I'm not right for this show. He said, just indulge me. Just take this music home, go look at this music, and then I'll see you tomorrow at 9:00. I said, you won't see me at 9:00, but thank you so much. And so as I'm walking out the door, he handed me the sheet music. I went and did my Les Mis audition, which went really, really well. And then my best friend from New York happened to be in town auditioning because he worked for a cruise ship company.
Right.
And so, but he's a brilliant pianist. And so in his hotel room, there's a piano. And so I told him this whole crazy story about Starlight Express. He said, well, come to my room tonight and we'll just sit at the piano and we'll just play the song. I hadn't even taken the time to look what the song was. When I actually did, it was the title track called Starlight Express, which is the lead, the starring role. And the journey, it's all about, in a nutshell, it's basically based on The Little Engine That Could, but there's a lot of spiritual elements. To me, the Starlight Express represented God. Right. And like I said earlier, I was always a seeker. And so I'm like, as I really looked at these lyrics, the chorus was like, Starlight Express, are you real? Yes or no? Starlight Express, please answer me yes, I don't want you to go. And that to me represented like a God, like a spiritual energy. Right. So I really connected with the lyrics. But as I tried to sing the song, it was very difficult. It was very challenging, probably a 3.5 octave range, which is from very low to very, very high range. Right. I'd never sung that before. I was a lyric baritone. For all you musicians out there, which I usually sing up to about an F or a G was my highest note. Well, in this song, it had a high C and 2 B flats, which is very, very high. And so my friends started playing. I'm like, I can't sing that. I'm like, oh. And so I just stopped. I was too afraid. So we did it again. And I said, well, I'm not singing this. I can't sing this song. So I put it away, went back home that night, woke up at 7:30 in the morning. And literally a voice in my head said, you're going to that audition. You're going to that audition. So I turned to my boyfriend at the time, Dan, and I said, I keep getting this voice telling me to go. He said, well, just go. I said, I'm not going to go and crash and burn. I've never gone into an audition where I didn't feel prepared and didn't think I could do it. But something literally, it was a force that I don't know where it came from. Propelled me. I took a shower. I started warming up my voice. I'm like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to do when I get to that part. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I arrived there and there were 2 other guys there before me. My audition was at 10:00. Not 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock.
Okay. 10,
and so I got there about 9:45 and I see 2 other people there. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I wonder what they're here for. So the first guy goes in, he crashes and burns. He cracks so much, his voice is cracking. He comes out and he looks just terrified. And I'm getting nervous. He sang the song Starlight Express there. We were all 3 there for that same row. I didn't realize that until I heard him sing. The second guy went in, he crashed and burned as well. And he came out, he's like, I don't know why I did this to myself. So I pick up my bag and I'm walking out the door. And they're like, Stephen, Paul is ready for you. They're all ready for you. I'm like, I don't know what, something literally, there was an energy and a force. I was walking out that door that I turned around and something in my head said, just give it a try. Go in there, give the song to the piano player. We start singing to it, gets to this middle section. I've never sung these notes before in my life. I hit these notes gloriously like an angel, like a bird. And I remember in my mind, I was just stunned by it. And I think I probably had an expression on my face that was sort of like, oh my God, where's this coming from? Which maybe worked as an actor. Who's singing this? And I finished and he said, that was great. He said, I want you to do it again. So then I was thinking, oh my God, now I got to do this a second time. I did it a second time. He said, one more time for me. He was trying to see if I had the stamina and the ability to be able to do that. And for some reason, it just got clearer and easier and easier by the third time. I was like, oh my gosh. So then after I'm done, he said, wait, one more thing. He said, this is my colleague here, Sabina Groman. She is the artistic director of the theater in Hamburg called, oh gosh. I just forgot their name. Anyway, they did theater. They did Phantom of the Opera. They did Les Mis. They did Cats. Right. Starlight was going to be their new show. These huge productions. Wow. And so she said, "Can you just do me a favor and repeat after me?" And I said, "Oh, sure." She said, "Wird es mich dunkel, sehe ich ein Licht leuchten in der Ferne." And I just did it, which was German. She said, "Oh, this is German." I didn't even realize what it was. And she said, "You have a great ear." She said, "That's perfect, crystal clear of what I just said to you." So they said, "Could you give us a couple of minutes?" So I go outside and I'm just thinking, this is such a crazy, bizarre thing. So I come back in and they said, would you just put on some skates? They had all these different size skates over in the corner. Oh, no. I'm like, I don't skate. When I was a kid, I did skate a couple times, but nothing, like when I was very, very young, but not a big deal, that kind of thing. So like, what size is your foot? I told them I was a size 8. They had a size 8. I put it on. Then there was a skating coach there. She started having me do this choreography and it was just, I don't know where it was coming from. Like the singing, it just was easy. Then she started to say, can you spin? So she showed me how to get on my toe stops and start doing pirouettes on skates, which I never would think I could do that. Did that, had me skate backwards, never skated backwards in my life. It all was just, it was meant to be. Wow. It was meant to be. So I take this, as I'm taking skates off, Paul says, well, Stephen, I have an incredible announcement to make. I said, what's that? He said, we've been to Chicago. We've been to New York. We've been to all over Europe. LA is our last stop. And we found our leading man. We'd like for you to be our star of Starlight Express.
Whoa.
They offered me the role right there on the spot. And I was just stunned and in shock. And I was thinking, I don't know what that means. He said, we'll be calling you in a couple of weeks to negotiate contracts and that sort of thing. He said, do you have an agent? I said, actually, I don't have an agent at this time. And they called me. And as I walked out to get in my car, it hit me. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to have to do this show. I'd seen it in New York City and it was terrifying. Very dangerous. They get up to skating 35, 40 miles an hour. They have a costume.
What?
35, 40 miles an hour. Yes, 3 levels. They built they took the Gershwin Theater in New York City and transformed the entire thing, spent $20 million. This was back in 1987, 88.
So that was a lot of money.
Yeah. And in Germany, they were building an actual stadium. So it was going to be even more money put on.
Oh my
And so I started thinking about this and I had to go back because I still had 2 more months I was working at San Bernardino Civic Light Opera I had 2 more shows that I had to do. And so also, and I told my boyfriend at the time, I said, I cannot do this. I'm going to turn it down. I cannot do this. And also I knew that it was 2 months away before rehearsal started. And the longer it was away, the more fear I was getting into. And like, he said, just wait and see what they offer you. But they called me back. And for some reason I said yes. And was getting more and more frightened. And the company started rehearsing 2 weeks before me because I had a job. I'd already signed a contract to do a company in LA to finish this show. Anything Goes and My Fair Lady. So the company was bonding for 2 weeks before I even got there, doing skating classes, all this stuff. So by the time I arrived, they had put me in my own little guest house with these 2 old German ladies that didn't speak a word of English. And I was terrified. And they also started building up this whole publicity thing about me. The star is from LA and he's done all this and blah, 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 blah. And so I was so terrified and shy. And people probably thought I was aloof, but I was just petrified. I'd never, been to a foreign country to sing in a foreign language, to skate. Then they tell me the costume weighs 100 pounds on my body, and then the helmet that I wear is 15 pounds. I
not
weighed
100 pounds.
100 pounds, and I was 136 pounds. So I was wearing 100 pounds on my body
And skating
with 15 pounds on my helmet head.
What?
So I was a teeny tiny little thing, 27-inch waist. Boy, do I miss that waist now, but it's not that now. And I did it, and somehow, some way, the angels. I mean, every day it was like you had like 20 minutes of sit-ups, to build up their stamina. You skate for like 2 to 3 hours a day, trying to build up the strength in your legs and your stamina, singing at the top of my lungs. Then I had my phonetics classes, to learn the German. It was crazy, terrifying. I would go home every night, literally, I'm not exaggerating. I would go home and I would cry. I would sit in the bathtub and just cry and like, I can't do this. But I'm not a quitter. I'm a type A.
Right.
You say yes, you keep your commitment. My mom always said, your word means everything. If you say yes to something, you have to find a way. And somehow, some way, I did it. And I flew my mother over for opening night. And she brought me 3 dozen red roses up to the very stage when I took my bow. And I just broke down and just sobbed because I did it. And I was sobbing because I can't believe that I was able to take on this kind of a challenge and actually fulfill it. My mom told me later that night she'd clapped so hard she'd broken blood vessels in her hand. She was so proud of me. So that showed me then and there.
You're making me cry here, by the way.
Oh, it just show me that hard work and believing in angels. I mean, I have protective angels that have really helped me through my life in several times in very, very dangerous situations. And I think that I just believe that the universe, it was from the first, them having me come into the room to actually the opening night, it was meant to be. And I think it broke a lot of fears in me for the time being. All those fears came back.
If you could do that, you could do anything. Come on.
And I said that to myself. And for the first 6 months, I felt that way. But like anything, you know what I mean? That confidence starts to whittle down. Then you get back to LA or whatever. And then it's like another rejection. You start doubting yourself. But to get to your point when you'd asked me, from there, I left the job and I went to New York City. So I didn't make it to New York City.
How long were you in Germany?
I did 6 months. I was supposed to do a year, but once I was in the contract, it was so demanding, and they don't have union rules. It's not like New York and in America where there are unions. I mean, they just literally worked me into the ground. I would do 8 shows a week, and I would do television performances and radio performance, recording the album. And I was so exhausted. Like I said, I was 136 pounds. By the time I left there, I was probably 125 pounds.
Wow.
And I was just physically exhausted. And so when we first were negotiating my contract, I said, I'm not sure if this is going to work out. So I had a clause that I could leave after 6 months or I could stay a year. And I decided to leave after 6 months, which was a good choice for me. I later went back 3 years later to work for that company again to promote and do television work. And then I would do the role of Rusty. That was the title character of Starlight. Right. Whenever the person playing went on vacation. So I got to do it again there for like it ended up being a few weeks, probably 3 or 4 weeks in the course of a year. But I was mainly there just to promote and do television work for the company. And then they cast me to do it in Las Vegas. So I got to do it an entire year in Vegas. So by now I was ready. I felt like it was more in my body. I knew there were union rules in Las Vegas that they couldn't just work me under the table. And I also didn't know how to say no. When they say, oh, we want you to do this. And I'm like, I need to take a show off. At one point I was so sick. I had like a 103 temperature, but I was afraid to call out. And I went to work and did it. That's when I said, this is not this is going to destroy my health.
Right.
And I didn't know how to say no. So I left. And that was also another big life lesson, having someone to negotiate, having an agent. If I had an agent, they would have said like, wait a minute, he'll only do this and this and this. But that's another part of my story, my journey that I don't mind talking about to give other people. I never felt worthy of getting an agent because I was dirt poor. I never had the foundation that you're worthy. So I did a lot of jobs, working high profile jobs where people were making a lot more money than me because I didn't have the courage to get an agent to negotiate for me. It's something I battled.
When you signed the German contract.
Yes.
So you had no agent at that point?
No agent. And an agent would have gotten me probably triple the amount of money that I accepted. And so it was a hard lesson. And even after that experience, you would have thought that I would have learned that lesson. I didn't learn that lesson until I met my husband, who I've been with now for 21 years, who is a master negotiator.
Is he?
A master at it. And so when people would hire me for a job, he could get me double and triple what I was afraid to ask for, because he'd say, look at his resume. And fortunately, I always worked even without an agent because directors, producers, they love my work. They would tell somebody else. So, I've had an incredible career, but it's all without an agent. I still don't have an agent. I'm now at the point right now, believe it or not, but now my dream has always been to be with CAA, Creative Artist Agency, which is the top agency. Meryl Streep is with them, Julia Roberts, Adele, Beyonce. But I think all this experience, I really finally have found it in my heart to believe that I'm worthy of that level and the experience that I've had. So I'll just go from no agent to the top agency in the world, right? So I've had a couple of meetings with people to try to get me there. I'm still not there. So if there are any listeners out here that know anyone at CAA, I really feel that that's where I'm supposed to be.
Is it hard to get an agent? I've never talked to all these podcasts.
Yeah, I think
I've never talked to anybody about
My husband had an agent, and for me, like I said, that there was a time when I was working in Las Vegas, there was somebody, a friend of mine in the show had an agent, and she loved my work, but she said, I already have 3 or 4 that are your type. So, once again, they're looking for people that will fit in their little niche. And so that also just, also made me more frightened. And there's just something in the back of my mind that I literally had to fight to say that you are worthy, you know what I mean? And worthy of getting what you deserve. And my husband seriously has helped me to realize that, what my self-worth is. But it is a constant battle, I think, when you grow up poor and you didn't have a foundation. My mother was so busy taking care of all of us. My father died and she was 39 years old, had to take care of 9 kids on her own in severe poverty. So she gave me so much love, but not the foundation of like self-worth. And, if someone comes to you and they want you to do a job, you should say, I want this. And that's why agents and managers are so good, because they do all that work. And then the artist gets to just focus on the creative part, the aspect. But it's taken me a long time. I'm 62 years old and been in the business 45 years and never had an agent, but had a really good career and had some really incredible times where I made a lot of money, but I probably could have made a lot more if I had an agent. And a lot of times where I was dirt broke and poor. That's the life of an actor, an artist. Right. It's up and down, up and down. And now I'm to the last 20 years have been focusing on all of my work, my own personal independent artist. I write, produce for some other artists as well, but it's all about the journey I'm on now is my own creative expression, with mainly the work that I write myself is what I want to perform and produce.
You mentioned you have a husband.
I do.
What's his name?
My husband's name is Jared Bortz. We met doing a 3-week Christmas show in 2001, right after 9/11. That Christmas, we were in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'd been single at this point in time for 8, almost 9 years, because my last relationship, I was traveling all over the world. I was gone all the time. I felt guilty. Felt like, you know what I mean? I had needs. And so I think I probably did things that I probably wish I hadn't. Cheated on him, and we're still very close friends, but I just felt guilty. But I had, like anybody needs, and you'd be gone. I was gone probably 8 or 9 months out of the year, always on planes, traveling everywhere. And so when we finally ended, I thought, I'm going to be single the rest of my life because I don't want to do that to another person. And I don't want to do that to myself, the guilt that I would feel of maybe doing things, behind their back, that sort of thing. But on a 3-week job, jokingly, I walked in the studio and he was a dancer. And from behind, he had a cute ass. He's wearing ballet tights. He's a beautiful dancer. And I said, oh, there's my new boyfriend. I just said jokingly. And lo and behold, 3 weeks later, the show's ending and I invited him to meet me in Nashville for New Year's Eve. He came there New Year's Eve and we've been together ever since for 21 years.
No way.
And there's an 18 and a half years age difference. He's 18 and a half years younger. Really? I say he's 18 and a half years older because I'm the baby and he's the grandpa. All my friends call me the baby and they call him the grand.
We've always been the baby at home. Right?
I've always been the baby. And my energy, 62, when people meet me, they say, oh my God, you're like a 30-year-old living in a 60-year-old body. Because I'm an Aquarian and we're very free and we're very open and we're very young-spirited, young-minded, that kind of a thing. So it works. It works for us. It's been challenging. We've had some challenging times the last few years, but
I think we'll go into some of that on your second podcast because I'm going to have you back,
Yeah.
So when you had him with you on New Year's Eve to when you actually lived together, what's the time span?
Well, we drove back. I had rented a car because I lived in New York City, and he had just moved to New York City a few months before that, because he was just out of college. He was only 22. I thought he was like 35 because he was losing his hair. So I saw him dancing. I thought, oh, poor guy, he's losing his hair, and he's in his 30s, and he was 22 years old. So
He's very handsome.
He's very sexy. Now he's bald, and I love bald men. I'm very attracted to bald men. And so we drove back to New York City. So we had a lot of time to really get to know each other. I kind of was telling him my story, which kind of freaked him out a little bit. He comes from very traditional. Him and two brothers, his mom and dad, madly in love with each other. They grew up, upper middle class. So he'd hear all the stories of my life and the poverty and my father, mental illness and that sort of thing. And I think it really did. At one point he said, I need to pull over. Your life is just too much for me to take. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. He said, no. He said, it's beautiful you're sharing it with me, but I just have never met anyone like this in my life. And then we got back to New York City, and I dropped him off, and I kissed him, whatever. And he said, oh, I have to tell you something. He said, I don't want a boyfriend. And I burst out laughing. I said, I don't want a boyfriend either. So this has been a fun little journey, but I had no intentions of this turning into anything other than what it's been for the last few days. And but then the next day he called, or I called, and we went to have dinner, and it was sort of like we're getting to know each other, that sort of thing. And we spent almost every day together. And then probably about 6 months into that relationship, he moved into my apartment. So he left the apartment he was in, and we've been together ever since.
Well, it wasn't too lesbian of you.
We didn't have cats at the time. We still don't have cats.
Oh. Now you still have a place in New York, don't you?
We do. Yeah, our primary residence. Is
that the same place you were?
No, because we had a tragic accident that happened, right. So we had to move out of our 5th story walk up. Now we live in a different apartment building with an elevator and doorman, that sort of thing. But it's our primary residence. We still live in New York. This is our first winter, spending our winters here.
How do you like it?
I love it so much.
There's a lot of creative types here.
Oh my God. I met, in the short time we've been here, I've met so many people. I met you, sat down and we were seeing theater together. Right. And I met 2 other writers. I'm working on 2 new projects with an Emmy Award-winning writer and director. I'm working with the guy, the play that I'd seen, Terry Ray. He and I are starting to work on a new musical. There's somebody else that I'm doing, something that's brewing. So the creativity, and I love just the peacefulness. It's completely opposite energy from New York City, but I still love New York City, but it's a nice balance of be here for 6 months and then be there for 6 months. And by the time these 6 months are almost over, I'll be ready to go back there for a while, and then I'll be ready to come back here. So I feel very blessed.
When will the 6 months be over?
We're going back the 3rd week of May. We'll go back to New York City for 4 months, and then we're going to come back in the fall for 6 weeks for Pride. We were here last Pride, Gay Pride in Palm Springs. We love that. And then we'll go back, and we always spend Thanksgiving and Christmas with some dear friends of ours. And then beginning of January, we'll be here from January till May. That's the plan. Then life happens. Busy making plans, and then life happens.
You have New York plates on your car. So do you drive when you go back?
No, we have it shipped. The car is shipped. Yeah.
Every 6 months you're going to ship that puppy back and forth?
Yeah, it's just too challenging with our situation to try to drive or do that sort of thing. And also I hate driving. I used to tell my husband, we could drive cross country. He's like, yeah, right. I drive an hour. And I'm like, can you drive? So
wow.
Yeah, it's just worked out. Yeah, it's worked out just to do that.
Well, I didn't tell you I started going to Terry's acting class a month ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I want to take an acting. Me and Jared, my husband, both wanted just see what it's like.
Really
It'd be fun.
Class. It's a fun
class. Oh, that's fun. That's great. That's wonderful.
I think we're going to wrap this episode up, but I am going to have you back because I want to hear more.
My pleasure. I would love to be back. Thank you.
I think I told you before we started, I liked you and Jared the second I met you.
I liked you too.
Yeah. So it's been really fun having you here.
Feeling is mutual.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.